Today, we're looking at Noodler's Park Red. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Noodler's Park Red is a red ink. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I put the ink into a different pen for a day. I then put it into a cross Bailey with a medium nib to take my notes for this video. Now, before we get to the writing samples, let's look at the sciencey bits. Up first is the chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And what we see is that this is a true prime red. It pushes, we do see a line that stays there, but it pushes up lighter and it does get darker as it moves up, gathering at the top. The one on the right that I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. Now we start to see some of the permanence that this ink can have. That red line across the bottom is very there and into this filter paper. The rest of the ink starts pushing up and then gathers at the top, but it's not made of anything other than red. No real complexity here. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard this ink might be to clean from your pen. Now I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, very surprising to me based on some of the permanence seen in the chromatography, is the lowercase h. The way it completely feathered out like that would make me not want to use this in a note-taking situation because I'm always afraid of losing something important. Water's reactivating, lifting all the darker tones, but leaving that lighter tone that we saw with that same permanent strip on the chromatography. Water's not doing it. The same thing with pen flush. It did nothing more than water did. Although I didn't experience any staining in my pens, but I didn't have it in there for any longer than 2 days when I've had it in a pen. So pen flush has not been enough to move it, not any more than water. Now bleach completely removes it from the page. That's a 1/3 bleach solution. And if you had to use a 1/3 bleach solution, you want to put that through your pen, immediately get it out, and immediately wash it out with water so that you don't rust any of those metal parts. Now for the inks I've tested, I found an average viscosity of 2.5. with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Noodler's Park Red has a viscosity of 2, making it just a little bit wetter than normal. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper with an extra fine and medium nib. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with a realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Noodler's Park Red has an average dry time of 15 seconds, making it normal. Now, let's look at the writing samples. I picked this ink up in sample form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine, and let's take a look at the Clairefontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. The extra fine is a slightly lighter tone with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and spots of shading, like the H in the is a little bit darker than the rest, the K in quick, the B in brown. Lazy looks a little bit darker than dog. The looks a little bit darker than over. So we do see some shading throughout the writing. 11 seconds to dry. Medium becomes a slightly darker tone than the extra fine, but it's between the extra fine and the 1.1 in its tone. With that, some of the shading looks a little nicer. The medium has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. It does offer some shading. Like I said, it looks a little bit nicer than the extra fine. Like in quick, the C is a bit darker than the rest of quick, and then it gets lighter again, then it gets darker into the K. The brown, the B is a nice dark tone. R got a bit darker, and then the OWN got lighter again. Fox starts nice and light, gets dark. Over starts nice and light and gets dark. Same with the, nice and light to dark. So it's very nice shading during the writing. 14 seconds to dry. The scrubby of both show us some color variation. You have to look far left to far right with the extra fine. It's a little more obvious with the medium. I think it showed a little nicer in the writing sample, and the smear test, you could recover this if you smeared while you were writing. So Tomoe River. We get no bleeding. Of course we get ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. The extra fine is the exact same tone that we see with the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. 15 seconds to dry. The medium, no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. It's the exact same tone as the extra fine. It took 22 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both showed us no color variation. We didn't expect it. We didn't get it. And the smear test, you could not recover this if you smeared while you were writing. Rhodia. No bleeding. No ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. The extra fine is slightly lighter as a tone. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and no shading on here. We had a little bit, we had our spots in the shading, and it was not too bad on the Clairefontaine. On a Rhodia, I'm not seeing it. And 12 seconds to dry. Now the medium is it's that, this is like 2 shades off, and it's 1 shade. It's all very, very close. It's the slightest differences. So it's slightly darker than the extra fine, and the 1.1 is slightly darker than the medium. The medium has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. It took 16 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both showed us no color variation. We didn't expect it. We didn't get it. And the smear test you could likely recover if you smeared while you were writing. So yellow Rhodia. It has no bleeding, no ghosting. It wasn't expected. It's still Rhodia. The tone of the ink actually changes for being on the yellow paper, which is unusual for Noodlers. Normally they're very dense, very opaque inks, and yet here I see some tone differences. It looks a bit lighter all the way. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. There's a couple spots that are darker. The LE in Noodlers is darker than the rest of Noodlers, and the K in Park is darker than the rest of Park. And that's it up there, but the point is that some of it can come through. There is some shading that can come through on this ink, not just on Clairefontaine. The extra fine is a slightly lighter tone than the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and some shading spots come through. So it shades much better on the yellow. The tone of the background, lightening it up, and then making some of the darkers darker is really what's helping it here. I see quick start dark, get a little lighter, and then get a little darker again. I see the start as a nice mid-tone, go to dark. Over starts light and gets dark. 12 seconds to dry. Very nice. Now the medium, the strange thing here is that it got even lighter than the extra fine. A shade or two lighter. It had no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and the shading itself looks better. In the, I see it start light to work its way dark. Quick starts light and works its way dark to very dark at the K. Brown starts dark and works light. Over starts light and works dark, like the R is much, much darker than the O. 16 seconds to dry. So there's a tremendous difference by putting this onto yellow paper. The scrubby for both show us a little bit of color variation when you look far left to far right on both of them. Not a whole lot. It's not a lot up here, but you definitely see it going on. And the smear test, you could recover this if you smeared while you were writing. Franklin Christoph paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. The extra fine is a noticeably lighter tone. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. It took 6 seconds to dry. Now the medium is the same tone as the extra fine. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. It took 8 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both showed us no color variation, and we didn't get any. But the smear test, you could recover this if you smeared while you were writing. Strathmore calligraphy paper. It's a very nice laid paper. It has no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1, it's funny because normally we look towards spread. It looks thinner, but it's definitely the stub. It just looks thinner. It's very funny. So it has no spread. It thinned. It has no feather, no halo, sheen, or shade. The extra fine is a noticeably lighter tone, with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, and 8 seconds to dry. This tone of the paper, I think, really works with this. It looks very nice on here.
The medium is a little bit darker than the extra fine. It's right about the same tone that we see with the 1.1. The medium has no feather, spread, halo sheen, no shade, 10 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us no color variation. We didn't expect it. We didn't get it. And the smear test, you could probably read what you smear if you were writing it. And that's all that I have for the writing sample.
Instead of finding inks that look like Noodler's Park Red, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I wanted a nice blue. I chose Noodler's Bernanke Blue because it was a blue. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So what do I think of Noodler's Park Red? I think you can get the slightest of tone differences from extra fine to broad or dry to wet pens, but the tone differences are pretty minor. It doesn't have very many properties that come through. Red is not my favorite of inks. It's not a bad ink. But for me, there's just a lot that's not there that I would have really liked to have had there. I wound up just kind of being disappointed about it. But then again, reds are not my inks. Thanks for watching.